D&D has some beautiful maps, especially in 5th edition campaigns like The Curse of Strahd or The Rime of the Frostmaiden. But today I'm going to try to convince you to ditch this and use this instead. To kick it off, go ahead and roll your Save versus Justin. To me, maps are key in Dungeons & Dragons, especially when playing with kids. At my table, they're often one of the central focuses of the game. We use them at the beginning of the campaign to set the stage, give all the players a common point of reference, and then draw all the characters to a starting point. It's usually the first visual thing on the table to spark our imaginations and get us more excited to explore. Usually that starts with a big world map of something like the Sword Coast, where players see familiar names like Baldur's Gate or Candlekeep. For new players, it can be kind of an initiation to the world of D&D, and the entry point into a bigger conversation and the language of role-playing. It's a common ground that they can use to relate to other gamers and start sharing experiences and stories. Where was your first game? Oh, we were in Neverwinter, where we were recruited by the Harpers to aid the town of Phandalin that was being plagued by a white dragon. How about you? For us it was Waterdeep, where Laurel Silverhand herself sent us to Skullport to track down a missing noble. It's a powerful tool to make new friends and create a shared culture of gaming that helps our community grow, but it can also be overwhelming. These maps represent a lot of detail and lore. It's a lot to keep straight. So we quickly move from that big overworld map to the starting point of an adventure. This is often a town or city. And again, D&D does an excellent job of providing beautiful detailed maps of towns with key points of interest and interesting characters to interact with. Those are great, but there's still a lot to ask of our new players. They may not feel an immediate connection to the town or a drive to interact with it. Maybe this is why so many classic adventures just start off in a tavern. All that detail and lore gets put away for a while the characters eat Ren Fair-style turkey legs and drink mead or ale or tea. But what if we enlist our players to help with a little world building instead? Maybe instead of this, your map starts off like this. Just the rough boundary of a town, and maybe the town square or the local lord's keep. Then you pass it off to one of your players and ask them a question. Where do newcomers stay when they first arrive in town? Please draw it on the map, give it a name, tell us a little bit about it. Then pass it on to the next player and ask a new question, something like, where do locals gather to relax and hang out with friends? Start with broad questions, but gradually make them more specific. What strange statues in the middle of the town square? What do people leave next to it as an offering for good luck? It's a great chance to weave in hooks or threads to the adventures you have in mind. Continue around the table a couple more times, but make sure to leave room to expand the map in the future. Now everybody has a stake in this town. It's unique to your adventure, but still in the context of a larger shared world. It may be a good idea to talk a little bit about the themes and flavor of the game you're hoping to run. Stuff like how common magic or technology is. It can be tricky when players add things that might seem beyond the scope of the game you had in mind. But that might also be a good cue for you to take another look at those themes. A fun part for you as a game master could be taking those locations your players came up with and adding to those ideas. Giving them your own spin, reining things in a bit if appropriate. One example was when one of my players, my son, added a magic shop in Kresk. He called it Risky Wares for Risky Warlocks. My adult brain was like, what? This is Barovia, domain of the vampire lord Strahd. This is a grimdark world where everybody's desperate and hopeless and probably covered in mud. A magic shop? Come on, it just doesn't make sense. Nobody has money to be buying +1 stuff. But then I remembered this guy and told my adult brain to shut up. Risky Wares for Risky Warlocks became a favorite shop to go get your slightly useful magic inventions or experimental potions, and also to sell off some of those items you weren't really using. It added a lot of comic relief to the game and created something that everybody wanted to check out. Also, as an extra bonus, when you make maps at the table, you start to build up this really cool gallery of drawings. It's great and hilarious to look back later and remember all the crazy shenanigans your players got up to. For us, this has spun off all kinds of inside jokes and has really helped our table bond. This is something that we've had a lot of fun with at our table, but like so many other things I'm excited to talk about in this series, it was inspired by other role-playing games in my library and conversations with gamers like you. For example, The Quiet Year by Avery Alder is a whole game centered around building a map together at the table. Civilization has just collapsed, but now is a time of peace and rebuilding before the Frost Shepherds come. The cards provided give you some really great cues to think about and inspire how the map grows and changes. The game is described as cartographic poetry. Companion's Tale by Laura Simpson is another great game that includes building a map together. This time centered on the life and times of an epic hero, but told from the perspective of their companions. This one also includes some great story and map prompts, along with these beautiful portrait cards. We'll talk more about portrait cards in another episode. And if you want to zoom in on how to create a unique and thoughtful dungeon map as a GM, check out How to Host a Dungeon. This one's more of a solo experience, but includes some great techniques on how to imagine a dynamic and living dungeon. Those are just a few that come to mind, though I'm sure there's others out there as well. Please check them out for further inspiration. I'll include some links below. And if you're excited to try this out at your table, please let me know. Drop a comment or click all the things to help spread the word, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.